The military junta and protest leaders have now signed a power-sharing declaration into law. It will establish a 3-year transitional government and outline who will make decisions. The agreement follows months of protests and killings since the military overthrow of the longtime President Omar al-Bashir. Now, under the deal, a so-called sovereign council will now be created. The military will lead it for 21 months and the civilians for 18 months. The opposition coalition is due to formally recognise the choice of a prime minister early next week, perhaps as early as tomorrow. Hiba Morgan joins us live now from Khartoum. So, Hiba, the reaction there to people who've waited so long for this?
Yes, indeed, Peter. There would be mixed reactions. People here at the venue where the agreement just has been signed about an hour ago are excited. They were chanting even before this agreement was signed, and during and after. They're saying that they finally have a civilian government. On the streets, people are also celebrating, but they're saying that they have cautious optimism. Just looking at Sudan's record of implementing power-sharing agreements and peace agreements, they're saying that they're worried that the military council may delay the implementation of some of the clauses and therefore will hold on to power longer, or would find a way to basically push the civilians out of power and continue maintaining control of the government until elections are held based on how they want it and who they want to see coming for presidency after the transition period is over. So there is a lot of concerns from activists, but they're saying that for the moment they will be celebrating the fact that after more than 8 months of protest, they managed to get the military council to sign a deal with the opposition coalition to start a new period for Sudan.
Why have they come up with this idea that the military is in effect tilting towards being in charge for 21 months as they move towards that sort of 3-year birthday period, I guess, where then the civilian administration, or the civilian part of the administration, will then take the top seat at the table?
Well, yes, this came after months and months of negotiations between the two sides, especially after June 3rd, when talks collapsed between the opposition and the military junta. They had to be mediated by the AU and the Ethiopian special envoy who was sent over. The prime minister who's here today, the Ethiopian prime minister, had to come to try to bring the two sides back to the negotiating table to try to work out a deal. So it took a lot of effort from both sides and from the mediators to be able to reach that kind of middle ground that would eventually see what people hope would be the new beginning for Sudan. But there are also concerns from the people, the protesters themselves, who have basically been the reason why Sudan has reached up to this point. They're saying that they're worried that the opposition coalition that represents them is not united. Already one of the largest opposition parties, the Sudanese Communist Party, has said that it is not backing the deal. The Sudan's Revolutionary Front, which is the group of armed groups that is part of the opposition coalition, are also saying that they do not support the deal that has just been signed. So it looks like the opposition is not as united as the protesters who have given them legitimacy want them to be. A lot of issues ahead of them, Dobi, a lot of issues ahead of the Transitional Military Council and the opposition coalition as Sudan begins its transitional phase.
OK, Hiba, many thanks. OK, let's take a look at how Sudan reached this point where we are today. Protests over rising bread prices started in December of last year and quickly turned into calls for the former President Omar al-Bashir to resign. He was accused of pushing up food prices and creating fuel and cash shortages through his mismanagement of the economy. He's wanted by the International Criminal Court on allegations of crimes against humanity, war crimes and genocide. The protests grew rapidly in early April. Thousands of people took to the streets daily and Bashir finally stepped down. Demonstrations continued until last month, calling on the military to hand over rule to civilians. More than 100 protesters have lost their lives during the push for democracy in Sudan. Joining us on set, keeping us company during this historic day for Sudan, Abdelwahab El-Affendi, Professor of Politics at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. He previously served as a diplomat at the Sudanese Foreign Ministry. Mr. El-Affendi, can the military, no, not can the military be trusted, should the military be trusted?
I think the short answer is no. But let's, I think, first celebrate the fact that we have reached this particular moment, because there was a worry that we would not get to this place without a lot of disintegration of the state. And I think a small correction about the casualties, I think there are quite many more than 100 people who have been killed in the last 7 months. I think the tally may be between 500 and 1,000, I think. But the fact that we have reached this level and not gone the way, for example, of Syria, where the army fought until the bitter end, and also Libya, where it has an international intervention, has to stop the killing. It is a blessing, and it shows that they have been restrained on both sides. And the fact that this should take us to a positive, in a positive direction. I think the dynamics which will be put in place, whether the military is to be trusted or not, is that now the military is not the main actor. The main political actor is going to be a civilian government.
Okay, the civilian government, key question, of course. They have a lot to live up to now.
They do, yes. I think the people have been, as I said, waiting for this moment for a long time. A lot of people expect that next morning, when the Prime Minister sits in his office, things are going to change. And of course, that's not going to be the case, simply also because the demonstration itself and the protests over the last 7 months have also grounded the state capacity down. And the economy has been even being eroded more and more. And the state capacity to intervene has been reduced. So in order to get to where al-Bashir was in December, this is going to take effort. And that's what the people have protested against.
Because after the protests kicked off, it seemed there was a point between, say, 4 weeks into an 8-month process and halfway through that process when there were so many variables.
Yes.
And now, if we look at what we're seeing today, it is so significant and so historic. It's not just luck. On the one hand, I guess it's actually really, really good international and more local diplomacy coming together, because the African Union got involved and said, actually, guys, chill, we can work this out. And also the United States signaled very clearly to the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates, look, you've got to take a step back from this, because you being up close and personal with this situation is not helping anyone.
Yes, I think you were right. I think the intervention of the African Union, specifically Abiy Ahmed, has actually played a catalyst role in that it gave the two sides a ladder to climb down from. At that point, the Freedom and Change forces were saying that no negotiation with the military after the massacre, and the military at the same time felt so empowered that they scrapped all the early agreements. But then the intervention of the African Union and Abiy Ahmed gave them a way, at least, to start talking to each other. The American intervention, as you rightly said, was very important in restraining the Emirates and the Saudis, who were actually egging the military council in the direction, and Egypt was with them at the same time. They realized at that moment that they will have to pay a price if they wanted to continue on this, because America in Sudan was not like in Libya or other places, because there's a very strong lobby on Sudan, which has existed during the last regime, mainly to do with the South. And this lobby is very powerful because it contains important constituents of Trump himself, the evangelicals, the churches, the right wing. So it was not an easy play for them. Mm-hmm. So these factors, but I think also the steadfastness and the unity of the people has also played a part.
Okay, we must leave it there, Mr. El-Affendi. Thank you so much for insight today, sir. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you.